What's going on, y'all? It's your boy Cool Colas here, and you are now tuning into a new video on my channel. For today's topic, we're going to be talking about the Penguin TV show, specifically the first season. And what I really want to go into is how this TV show was mainly about the false equivalences within classism. So let's get into it. A lot of people who I spoke to said that the Penguin show was pretty good, so I decided to check it out for myself, and I also think it was pretty good as well too. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I really liked the actor who actually played Penguin as well too. A lot of the other actors, they did a phenomenal job as well too in their respective roles, but I really liked the way that this actor embodied the Penguin character. Not only did he have the look, he also had the mannerisms and also the behavior that Penguin has as a character. The only other Penguin that I could think of that really was held in high regard in my mind was the guy who played Penguin in Gotham. The one thing that I noticed while watching this was that this show was really about classism, but specifically it talked about the false equivalences within classism. So for those of you all who do not know what a false equivalence is, this is a fallacy that is often presented where one uses false or illogical reasoning in order to compare two things as if they have the same weight, but they do not. So in other words, it's like an apples to oranges type of comparison. So these two things that they may compare, I want to back up a little bit. These two things that they may compare, they may have some similarities or they may have one similarity, but then they compare them as if they have equal weight without going into the nuances of how one thing is vastly different from that other thing, despite them having some similarities. The main point that they tend to drive home over and over and over again within this series is this idea that Penguin is poor and the people who he works for are rich. And he shows the disparity between where he lived at, where he grew up and everything like that, and then where they grew up. So when I say they, I'm speaking about the Falcones and even to some extent the Maronis, who are these two beefing families. But you have Penguin where he's working for the Falcones, and he is somebody who is poor, and he's treated as a poor person as well too. So he shows the disparities of how it is being a poor white man, and he's dealing with a rich white family and all of the deceptive and terrible things that they do within their family of what seems to be gang members and people who are doing dirty things in order to get on top and stay on top. So you see this dynamic of Penguin trying to find out how he, a poor white man, can become a rich white man by doing what he needs to do to get over on people and get to where he needs to get to. And this is a constant theme, like I said, that is thrown around all the time throughout this series. Where the false equivalences come in is when we deal with the Vic character. So for those of you all who do not know, there was a character in this series named Vic. He was a Afro-Latino, and he was positioned as Penguin's sidekick. So the reason why I said that the whole idea of false equivalences comes into play here is because there was often this comparison too between the status of someone like Vic and the status of someone like Penguin. Penguin grew up poor. He had his mom. His mom had a bunch of kids as well too, and they really didn't have any income or anything to show for and whatnot. And it was also even hinted at that the mother relied on Penguin to be that son of hers who was going to basically come back to the family and make them rich and show them all that he can be this badass, power-driven mogul who had all this money and he got it through the mud. But then you also had him taking that situation and comparing it to what was going on with Vic. Vic was also poor as well too. Vic also grew up with this Afro-Latinx, I guess for lack of better words, family who ended up getting wiped out because there was a great disaster that happened in Gotham. And so he was, again, also poor. So they were trying to take the situation of a white man who was poor and equate it to an Afro-Latino man who was poor as well too, and to say, hey, we're both the same because here we are, we're both poor. They don't care about guys like us. They don't care about, what happens with us and whatnot, as if they had the same situation. But this is a false equivalence because the idea of race actually comes into play here as well too, and it's getting totally ignored as if it's not a factor. But they made sure that Penguin's protege wasn't a poor white man just like him. They made sure that Penguin's protege was a poor black man, Afro-Latino black man, who was breaking into cars and stealing shit and doing shit he wasn't supposed to. It was almost a way to sun the black man once again, just like they've done in a lot of lore. The dominant society loves to portray this fallacy that being a poor white person is equated to being a black person, no matter what the culture of that black person is. But what they need to understand is that this is just emphatically false in every single way. So when we think about this concept of somebody who is poor and white and somebody who is black, what you're essentially saying is that race is just not a factor here whatsoever. But understand that being a poor white person is a circumstance. Being a black person is a race, something that someone cannot help. And to be quite honest with you, it's not something that somebody wants to be able to help as well too. We are proud of being black. So essentially what I'm saying to you is, if you are a poor white person and you are comparing yourself to a black person and trying to either negate race or say that being black means being poor, what you're basically saying is my white supremacy failed me. So how can I get ahead so that I can reap the benefits of it? In the show, Penguin would constantly attempt to drive home the point that he was poor and that Vic was poor and that they were the same. And he also tried to create some level of camaraderie, which ended up being a fake camaraderie, of course, because he killed Vic, but a camaraderie with Vic as if they were in the same circumstance and they were two guys who were trying to do what they had to do to get on top. They got a black man, in this case, an Afro-Latino, who was following in the footsteps of Penguin. They know that the audience and those who watch it are filled with a bunch of idiots who aren't going to look at culture and aren't going to look at the differences between somebody who is FBA and somebody who is non-FBA. They're just going to see somebody who is black, and just the central idea that as a black person, they are going to have the same circumstances as somebody who is white and somebody who is poor. And by having Penguin around, he was somewhat of a mentor who was helping Vic to basically get his life on the right track. So this goes back to this thing, how they try to portray this message to black society that we need to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps because we are a degenerate group of people who tend to create petty crimes and do things that are actually harmful to society. So they were trying to re-perpetuate this message by saying, this is what happens. You could be Vic too. You could be this individual who goes around and steals and knocks folks over and takes from people and breaks into cars and all this other stuff. Or you could basically get on board with having your own empire, but you have to basically make better choices because all of this is about choices ultimately, not your race or anything else. They even try to play it up by having Vic talk about his family and how a lot of them had gotten, or all of them had gotten wiped out because of what happened with the disaster that went on in Gotham and whatnot, and how Penguin also too didn't have anybody except his mother and all of his brothers were gone and whatnot. But one thing I will say is that this show did do a good job of, at the same time, while portraying false equivalences, showing the issues with creating a false equivalence. Now, I don't know if that was on purpose or if that was accidental, but there were a few things that I noticed that showed that these two people were not equal. One, it showed the idea that no matter if that white supremacist is poor or rich, they're always going to be conniving. Notice that Vic was loyal to Penguin the entire time. Now, some may attribute that to the fact that you have sometimes a tether class who is super loyal to the white supremacists when they come over here and they try to reap opportunities. But I don't even see it that way specifically. I see it in a way where he was essentially a black person who was loyal to Penguin, almost to the point where he would not even go with his own girlfriend who wanted to start a new life and wanted him to come with her. But what he was trying to do was stay loyal to Penguin the entire time. But see, Penguin was only loyal to himself. And he really wanted this empire at the end of the day. He didn't really see Vic as family. He saw Vic as somebody who he could use to help him reach the goal that he needed to reach. And when he got too close, it was time to basically get rid of him. Now, some of you all are going to listen to this and you're going to be like, well, the idea was to show that Penguin is just conniving and that's just what it is. But that's true, but that isn't the only thing that they were trying to show. What it shows you is that in the dominant society, they will do anything sneaky that they have to do in order to get on top, even if that means that they have to get over on each other, because to them, a win is a win no matter what way that you get it. So you have to look at this from a more of an external standpoint and more of an outward standpoint. They were essentially showing the message that no matter what tax bracket you were in as a white person, your mission is always to dominate and to control. And you don't have any plans to have anybody come at the top with you if they are a liability to you. And Vic was a liability to Penguin once he started basically saying that, you know, he was like family and all this other stuff. He had already used them. When the white supremacist is finished with their tools, they break them. They also had a scene where Vic was pulled over by the police because he was driving a nice vehicle, that being Penguin's purple vehicle, if I'm not mistaken. And what that shows is that he was still getting racially profiled. So it's as if the false equivalence of Penguin being a poor white person and Vic being an Afro-Latino didn't even hold water because he still was racially profiled. And this is something that did not happen to Penguin whatsoever during the series where, you know, the police were profiling him. Now, he made it seem like he had some experience with it and you just have to do dirty things to get your way. But ultimately, they did not show this whatsoever throughout that entire series. And Penguin had been doing a whole lot of dirty stuff, right? And when I say things such as they have white privilege and they have $1 million worth of whiteness, what I mean is that they have benefits that we as black people do not have. And I'll give you a few examples of what I mean by that. Number one, they can get off with impunity if they unalive a bunch of people, whether they are white, whether they are black, or whatever the case may be. We as black people would never get away with something like that. Now, do we want our people to get away with something like that? No, we want them locked up if they commit a crime that they should not have commit, or any crime whatsoever. But with the dominant society, they find ways and loopholes and things like that to either justify what they've done or basically make it so that their sentence is much lesser than what it should be. With us, they make our sentences more strict than what they should be. Now, when it comes to the other benefits, these people in the dominant society don't have to worry about being racially profiled when they go into certain businesses or things like that because they own and control everything in every area of activity, basically. So in other words, you know, they don't have to worry about being racially profiled when they go into grocery stores and when they go into their jobs and when they go into, different hospitals and all this other stuff. Race is never a factor with these types of things, but that is a factor when it comes to us specifically, right? There are certain things that basically happen to us more often than that happen to them. All right, y'all. I hope you all enjoyed this video. I hope you all enjoyed what I had to say, and I'll definitely have more to come, so make sure that you stay tuned. If you haven't done so already, hit the like button, subscribe button, share button, and bell icon so you get notifications for whenever I come out with new content on this channel. Other than that, I'll talk to y'all later. Peace.